This has long been one of the most misunderstood features that Google have come out with. It is one of those things that just sounds great. Everyone wants more new customers, right? The problem is that it's just not that simple. Seeing that new customer acquisition has been out for a while now, I thought it might be about time we took a deep dive on the feature so you can get the most out of it and know when to stay away, because it's not always a great idea to use. In the end, I'll tell you a surprising stat about existing customers and why you shouldn't focus 100% on new customers, even though your entire growth and scale in your business depends on it. So let's get into it. The way the new customer acquisition feature works is the following. So first and foremost, when we're in the interface, we go in and we identify when a conversion comes from an existing customer. Let me just try to show you here. So in this case, it's just this segment. The normal best practice is to use conversions and customer match list, like all the first party data, enhanced conversions, to figure out when a conversion comes from an existing customer. Smart bidding then uses this to know when a conversion is from a new or an existing customer, which means that if we add an extra value when a conversion is known to be from a new customer, then this value then skews, because this is then the conversion value instead of 89, turns to 139. So this then skews the bidding algorithm to value auctions, keywords, products, and channels that bring in more new customers. Overall, this is a good feature and it can help you focus on new customers over existing customers. But before we just praise it, I believe there are three things that are important that everyone knows about the feature before you just enable it. The number one is that the feature's only as good as the data that you give Google. The less data there is, the less possible it becomes for Google to know that a conversion is an existing customer and will default to a new customer. This is not good or bad, it's just how it works. Number two is the conversion value gets added to your reported total conversion value. So like I showed you before, if you add $50 to the new customer acquisition value, then your entire reporting of Google Ads gets added $50 to it in every single place that you look at it inside of Google Ads, and if you export that number. So if you try to do the math on this, so I have two scenarios here, one without a new customer acquisition added value and one with an added value. To keep it simple, it's $50 like we saw before, and we have 3,500 new customers in both buckets. But with the bucket where we add value, the new customer bucket goes from 276 to 451,000 in revenue. Now, the existing customers, again, same amount of conversions in both, and same amount of conversion value in both. This means that the total revenue that you see in your account goes from 395 to 570. If you're spending 100K on this, you technically go from the system looking at a 395% ROAS to a 570% ROAS and will be bidding up. The reason why that Google Ads reports this as actual revenue is because it's the value that smart bidding uses to bid for. If you were to try to go back and review ROAS versus the target that you set at any given time, it's important. Now, this is the explanation we get from the product managers when we ask them, and I understand where they come from. It makes sense to a degree. Personally, I would have preferred this new conversion value or new customer conversion value to get its own column completely separate, because it really messes with your ability to review trends in your data. But I also see that if you look at a bidding portfolio strategy and you can't put in those custom conversion values and add those things in there, I do see where this is the best option they could have come up with. I still think that there's a better thing to do, because we're going to change the new customer acquisition value or we get better audience data. You can't really compare your data year over year. Now, the third thing is, and this is the thing that you really, really need to understand, there is nowhere in this interface that it explains that this effectively lowers your ROAS target. It's a shame that Google doesn't explain this better, because adding fake values to new customers essentially lowers the ROAS that smart bidding is allowed to hit when it thinks it's getting new customers. And I would love to see this in the new interface. Google already shows this for the new smart bidding exploration feature, which I have a video for. You should definitely see it. So they could easily do it here. Instead, like I show you here, we get this slightly confusing overview where, hey, do you want to bid higher for existing customers? And like, you know what the answer is to that is 100% yes. But if by doing that, I actually start showing up and I start saying, okay, now this is how much you're essentially you're going to lower your ROAS with, because it already knows your ratio of existing to new customers. So it could actually show you this. What is also important is what new customer acquisition doesn't do. It doesn't lower your cost for brand terms. That's a completely different conversation and is not relevant here. It doesn't lower your spend on retargeting retargeting audiences either. Many makes the assumption that retargeting is for existing customers. It's absolutely not. If it's a new customer, then the system will still go crazy on retargeting. So there's no thing there. Now, who should use the new customer acquisition feature? I believe it comes down to like one bigger picture and then a couple of small things. Now, the big thing is whenever getting new customers have a meaningfully larger value than an existing customer. Like a couple of examples here is that a subscription business is obvious. Getting a new customer that pays for something again and again over an 8, 9, 12, 18-month period is obviously more valuable than just rebuying an existing customer. It jumps over to being subscription to a high repeat purchase rate e-commerce. Often this is consumables, but not always. I've seen many of our clients on Savvy have a super high 40% repeat purchase rate, and I'm just like, wow. So that means that buying a new customer can be really, really important because they'll buy again and again and again. Another aspect is when you have a large resale network, and this is most often with DTC and apparel brands that sell into a lot of stores, so there'll be a lot of competition for their brand term. To grow the business meaningfully, by growing the brand recognition simply means that using the marketing budget to target new customers who are what I call net new, people who don't know the brand already, instead of fighting with your retail network over the pool of existing customers, it's just stupid. Another example is when you're starting to max out Google Ads. It sounds cray-cray, but many businesses in Savvy start hitting a limit to how much they can grow with Google Ads. And at that time, one way to outgrow the market that you're just following in terms of the growth rate might be to distinguish how much you're paying for a new customer versus an existing customer. Now, let's talk about how to actually use new customer acquisition, because it's not just applying a value and then hope for the best. The first thing you want to do is you want to create an existing customer audience. We call this the setup phase. You want an existing customer audience. You fill it with two things. Your customer match list, which again is your email uploads from your Klaviyo or directly from Shopify or from your other email provider, where you send your emails from. All your existing customers go in there, not your email subscribers, because they're not an existing customer. These are your customers you put in there. And then you, of course, use your conversion data where you have enhanced conversion as well. Then we move it over to the baseline setup. On day one, when you've added your existing customer audience and you trust it, then what you do is you add 0.01 or $1 into the new customer conversion value in order to get the data. That is what I showed you here, where you say, okay, so to bid higher, instead of using account level settings for this campaign, we'll just add 1. And then we can just start getting the data to see how many new customers are we actually getting. Because what we'll use this for is that after the first 28 days, we now analyze how many new customers are acquired across all our campaigns. We want to do this to establish a baseline in 4 different areas. Number 1 is are there actually meaningful differences? Like, are there campaigns where you get a lot more new customers than others? Then you maybe want to group keywords together, like versus brands, versus categories, versus generic, to see if you can find any meaningful difference in between the different types of campaign groups and campaigns that you're running. The second thing is, are there more or less new customers than what you expected? So if your general repeat rate in the business is 20% and Google is saying, no, the repeat rate is 2%, then there will most likely be something wrong with the data that you're pulling in, and it's going to be over-calculating how many new customers are. Number 3 is, how does the new to existing customer ratio compare to your overall business? That's more or less the same as before, but if you have additional attribution tools where you can compare the numbers for Google Ads specifically, this part is crucial. You really want to know, like before, how will Google these numbers in new customer values reflect your true new customers in the business? And then just get the number, like what is your new customer rate? Create a custom column so you can get a percentage of total conversions are new customers. Now we move over to the experiment phase, because based on the numbers I showed you before, you can start adding a conversion value based on how much lower you want to take your ROAS for new customers. If your AOV is $80 and your target ROAS is 400%, try adding $20 in value, which is essentially takes your ROAS for new customers down to 300%. Just keep in mind that you're lowering your overall ROAS target. If you have a very tight blended ROAS target, which means that if you're allowed to spend 20% of your revenue on marketing and you're hitting that today, by lowering your ROAS target, you will hit a higher blended ROAS. The alternative to ending up hitting a higher higher blended ROAS is obviously that at the same time adding a new value for new customers, then you increase your ROAS target, let's say to 450. This way you still hit the same ROAS before, but with a higher emphasis on new customers. This will potentially lower your existing customer value, but lower the ROAS you expect from new customers. So it should bring in more of those, and that should balance itself out. This might sound confusing. It's just something I really wanted to mention, because way too often people just add a new customer acquisition value and don't think about, hey, we're still targeting 400% on existing, and new go down to 300. Then the new value from new customers needs to bring in more. There are cases where that's the right thing to do, but not always. The next stage is then to measure. Again, we wait 28 days, maybe even longer. Your baseline new customer rate was 40% before that you got from these Google Ads campaigns. Does it now become 50? Does it become 60? 70? Now that you've added the new customer value, this is where you start testing it. Try a higher value, try a lower. What does this do? Just like everything else. I haven't still to this day not opened a single account where the new customer value has been changed over time. So figure it out, measure it. What is the impact? And then repeat, follow the numbers. Because look at what I just did in all this thing that I'm showing you here. I didn't just go into the account, click the new customer, added a conversion value. That's what everybody does. They just add an extra conversion value and let it run, hardly ever revisiting it or doing anything about it. Basically just lowering the ROAS target for everything. So one of the things you need to be careful with when you're working with this is stacking adjustments. It's a concept we have from manual bidding back in the day. And it's one of those things we just need to be careful with, because if you start doing smart bidding exploration and you have new customer acquisition and you have seasonal bid adjustments, you start having a lot of different things that can be a problem. Now, value rules should also be on this list, but almost nobody uses these in e-commerce. So that's it. It should also go without saying that if you go from tracking revenue to tracking profit, then you obviously have to adjust your approach. Now, there are some alternatives to Google's new customer acquisition feature that we can play with, because most people just talk about this thing where we just say, okay, we add a conversion value for higher customers, but you can actually also apply only bid for new customers. Basically uses the same feature, but instead of adding additional value for new customers, then it doesn't bid for users that are already identified as an existing customer. This is what we did in the setup section. Basically means you split your campaigns in two, one for new customers and one for existing customers. For businesses with a heavy focus on new customers, this is an ideal solution. It's a lot better than just trying to add a conversion value and kind of screw it all up, but you need a lot of data to do it. Taking one campaign from 1,000 conversions per month and splitting into two is usually okay, but taking a 200 conversion campaign and splitting into two is not really a good idea typically. Another aspect is that if you do this and then it also limits your general approach to your campaign structure. So if we're looking at it this way, if you have a shopping campaign structure with a bestseller split, it essentially turns 3 campaigns into 6. But if this is you, then there is a workaround. And like I always say this, just don't split campaigns if you don't have to. In this case, you might want to keep splitting out your bestsellers and your main campaign, but like the saboteurs campaign, you don't have to. So you actually end up with 5 campaigns instead of 6. And if you also have a fallback, if you also have a brand campaign, etc., you don't have to split those up. Now, that was just bidding solely for new customers. And this is quite advanced, so this is only if you are ready for it. Another option is to send in lifetime values for new versus existing customers instead of the revenue. You basically create another conversion action for this. In this case, you're basically hard coding your lifetime value from each purchase. So it is a rather complex thing if you're not used to it. But let's say that this can work extremely well if you have a system on your end where you're in your CRM, you're calculating the lifetime value consistently from a new customer, depending on, let's say if somebody buy coffee beans or a coffee pod, and there's a much higher value on the coffee beans than the coffee pod because your coffee beans are roasted by yourself and you have a higher lifetime value for it, then all this sending in a custom value based on what the customers buy can be a strong way to steer smart bidding towards new customers. It's advanced. I'm not going to go into more detail. If you think that sounds good for you, you already know what you're supposed to do. Then there's the third option that's coming out of a couple tools at the moment, and it's creating 2 conversion actions. Like I'm showing you here, then it's basically just we have a conversion action for returning customers and a conversion action for new customers. I'm not 100% sure understanding what the idea is here. The positive side is that we get 100% clear data. You use server-side tracking to check if a customer is known. If it's known, then you send the value to the existing customer conversion action. If it's not known, you send it to the new customer conversion action. So far, so good. It's awesome. But from there, I can only see the use case for this as a new versus existing customer split of campaigns. One target new customers where, like, again, if I show you the setup here, so you have a new customer campaign, the settings is set to the conversion action for the new customers, right? And the other one is targeting returning customers. So the only value that smart bidding sees is is the new customers or the returning customers. So it only bids for these segments and only bids for these segments. You can then do some exclusions to try to make it even better, but I'm not really sure that I think that all of this is the best option, and I'm not sure it's a better option than the built-in Google system, because in the Google system we are telling the algorithm to not bid for one or the other. Like if we do bid only, then we're saying if this is not a known existing customer, then don't bid for it. Sometime, like I won't say all the time, but I've had a few cases lately where the amount of new customers identified by Google is actually 98% the same as what the business is finding out. So I won't say it can't work. Oversimplifying this and doing it this way because you get server-side tracking might not be the right decision, but this is a brand new thing in many tools. Let's see what it has. The last thing I want to come in and talk about is do not neglect your existing customers. One of our bigger clients had a study done, and 70% of existing customers needed a paid media touchpoint to buy again. 70%. Before they did this study, they had excluded all existing customers from the Meta ad phones for 6 months. And they quickly reverted that decision, but at this point, it was a year later and it had hurt the business. During this time, Google Ads grew a lot because we used the standard shopping, and back then there was no way to exclude existing customers. So we got through that time without getting hurt. A second last thing I want to say is that don't confuse brand bidding with new customer acquisition. It's not a conversation about whether or not your branded keywords bring in new or existing customers. So you or your team can use this information to justify overpaying for branded keywords. Not even Google can do that. The conversation is about, when we come to brand terms versus non-brand terms, is using other bidding methodologies than target ROAS to lower your cost without losing volume. Bidding higher for new customers who search for your brand term sounds great in theory, but is simply just not needed. It'll increase your cost without increasing your new customer volume. To summarize everything we learned today is new customer acquisition feature is great for the right business and can help you scale. Just turning on added conversion value for new customers is not the right way to do it. Establish a baseline, calculate your new customer ROAS target, apply the value, measure it, adjust it. This is the way. This way you're ahead of everybody else and don't misuse the feature or accidentally lower your ROAS target overall while chasing new customers. I hope you loved today's video. I really enjoyed this one. I would love to hear your thoughts on new customer acquisition feature in Google. Let me know. If you're into practical PPC insights that you can actually help you, then subscribe. I share tips, breakdowns, and call out what's working and what's not. No fluff, just the stuff that you can use every single week.